All right. So yesterday I had begun speaking about the law of karma and how unfair and how unrealistic it is, or how impossible to surmount it is, because if you try to do good karma, you will also get some bad karma. Just as from a fire which purifies, some smoke arises, so also from every good deed that you attempt to do, some evil also arises. And I said that today I would explain to you what the Bhagavad Gita says is the path to becoming free of karma. I explained to you that the Bhagavad Gita starts with Arjuna's paralysis as a result of being terrified by the karma he will incur. He is not paralyzed by the size of the army or the skill of the warriors facing him. He is terrified by the karma that will come upon him when he kills his opponents. Therefore, the entire dialogue, while it contains so many things and is so rich in spiritual knowledge, is also about how to overcome the law of karma. And in fact, the whole book is about how to overcome law of karma, because you will find it in different aspects of the different types of yoga. But here what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to give you the basic principles and summarize it in brief, because we don't have that much time. And perhaps when we eventually go on to doing it chapter by chapter, verse by verse, more of it will emerge. I explained to you in the lecture, Who Am I?, that Krishna as Purush impregnates Prakriti. And therefore Krishna says that you are formed of both Prakriti as well as Purush. Prakriti Krishna calls as his Bhinna Prakriti, his inferior energy. So Krishna says, Bhumi apo nalo vayur kham mano buddhi revacha ahankara ityame bhinna prakriti ashtada. So your mind, intelligence, ego, and the elements that make up the physical body are Prakriti. Aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahabhao yayedam dharyate jagat. He explains that you are part of my superior energy. You are the infinitesimal part of Purush. And because you are small and infinitesimal, you are struggling with your own Prakriti of mind, intelligence, ego. So he says, Mamai Vauso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Manashastindriyani Prakritistani Karshati. So you are Purush and Prakriti. But in truth, you are Purush alone. And because you identify with the Prakriti part of yourself, this causes karma. This causes karma. Karma is caused by not realizing that you are Purush. Karma is caused by believing that you are Prakriti. So as I explained to you, there are two aspects of one's being. One is the physical aspect, and the other, I pointed out, the mind, intelligence, ego, the karmas, the vasanas, all your inchoate desires, all of these form your subtle body. And when this Purush leaves the physical body, he carries with him the subtle body, leaving behind the gross body. So the gross body that is left behind, the elements merge with the elements. So fire goes to fire, earth goes to earth, air goes to air, water goes to water, wind goes to wind, ether goes to ether. But the subtle body, it accompanies the soul and it moves on to the next gross body. Shariram yad avapnoti yad chapya utkramati ishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandhani va ashayat. The soul moves on from one body to the next, carrying with it the impressions of the previous life, just like the breeze carries the fragrance of a flower. And what does it carry? It carries a subtle body with it. The subtle body is also spoken of elsewhere in the Yoga Vasisht, that the subtle body is a bundle of karmas. So, in short, the soul carries the bundle of karmas in the form of the subtle body from one body to the next. For one who has realized that he is the soul, for one who has realized that he is Purush, when he leaves the gross body, the subtle body does not accompany him because he knows that he is not the subtle body. There is no attachment between this realized soul and the subtle body. Therefore, just as the gross body is given to the elements, the subtle body also goes back to the Mahat, or it goes into the universal mind, the universal subtle body it goes into. So the objective is to understand the subtle body, because the subtle body is really the source of your karmas. It is the source of your suffering. It is the source of your miseries. And it all results because you mistakenly imagine you are not the soul, but you imagine that you are the subtle body. Of course, some of you believe you are the gross body also. But even those who have understood I am not this body, even they imagine that I am the subtle body. So what is this subtle body? And it's very clearly described in Yoga Vasisht that this subtle body is called many things depending upon the functions that it performs. It is not structurally separate or not structurally divided, but functionally when it performs actions, we call it by different names. So when this subtle body or this Sukshma Sharir discriminates between heat and cold and joy and sorrow and honor and dishonor, this Sukshma Sharir is called Buddhi, or the intellect. When this same subtle body has likes and dislikes, when it has Sankalpa and Vikalpa, then this subtle body is called Manas. When this subtle body recalls, remembers, then this subtle body is called Chitta. And lastly, when this subtle body arrogates, I, me, mine, this is mine, I am this, when it has this arrogation as its function, this same subtle body is called Ahankar. So I'll just briefly repeat it. If it discriminates, it is called Buddhi. If it has likes and dislikes, it is called Manas. If it recalls and remembers, it is called Chit. And when it arrogates in terms of I, me, and myself, it is called Ahankar. The spiritual journey is the path of learning how we are not this subtle body, but we are the soul. And therefore, to understand that we are not this subtle body and that we are the soul, the subtle body in metaphor is compared to a sorrow tree that bears fruits of suffering. And this sorrow tree that bears fruits of suffering, which is a subtle body, is described in the following manner. That many people understand that their subtle body is a sorrow tree that bears fruits of suffering. So first they think that perhaps if I pull off all the leaves from the tree, then by controlling my likes and dislikes, I will be able to transcend this subtle body. So they try to control their sankalpa, vikalpa. They try to control their rag and dvesh. And they think that by doing so, they will transcend the subtle body. But if you pull the leaves of a tree, and even if the tree becomes bare, is it going to die? The leaves will sprout again. Others think that perhaps we should get rid of the branches. So they go into all kinds of things in order to control the manas. They do all kinds of things in order to control the manas, to control the mind. But if you cut all the branches of a tree, is the tree going to die? The branches will sprout again and they will extend once again. And leaves will grow on them once again. So if the leaves are the likes and dislikes, pulling them doesn't help. If the branches are the manas, working on the manas doesn't help. Perhaps the buddhi, maybe I can do something about the buddhi and transcend the subtle body. But the buddhi is like the trunk of the tree. You can chop down the trunk of the tree, but although you chop down the trunk of the tree does not die. It may take a long time for that trunk to grow again, but eventually that trunk will grow once again into a fully formed tree with all the branches and all the leaves and a very strong stem to replace the one that you chopped. Similarly, working with the buddhi also does not help you to transcend the subtle body. Working with the manas does not help you to transcend the subtle body. Working with the likes and dislikes, sankalpa, vikalpa, rag and dvesh, that does not help you to transcend the subtle body. There is only one way by which you can transcend the subtle body. Only one way to destroy this tree, this sorrow tree which carries fruits of suffering. And that one way by which you can get rid of the tree is by uprooting it, by destroying the root of the tree. And the root of the tree is called ahankar. The root of the tree is called the ahankar, and only when you uproot this tree, only when you attack the root of this tree, of the subtle body, can you become free of the subtle body completely. You can say that the soul and the subtle body are joined at the hip, but the joining between the subtle body and the soul, that joint is the ahankar. The subtle body is that connects with the soul is the ahankar. The ahankar is the glue that holds the soul to repeated cycles of birth and death. Because it is the subtle body that forces the soul to take rebirth. It is a subtle body that forces the soul to carry with it its bundle of karmas. It is a subtle body that carries with it its bundle of vasanas or inchoate desires of which you yourself are unaware. See, desires exist at different platforms. When you are yourself not aware of the desire, it is called vasana. When you are aware of the desire, but you have not spoken it out, it is called sankalpa. Some of you have taken part in Hindu ceremonies or Vedic ceremonies will have the priest telling you, "Aankhein band karke sankalp karo," which means think about the desire, don't express it. So that desire which is unexpressed and unknown is called vasana. That desire which is in your mind but not expressed is called sankalpa. And of course, we all know that when we express the desire, it is called ichha. So that subtle body which is full of all these desires, particularly it is full of the desires for the unconscious desires, it carries with it the bundle of karmas, it carries with it your thought patterns, your speech patterns, your behavior patterns. All of this is carried in that subtle body. And the only thing that causes that subtle body to stick on to the soul and thereby forces you to take rebirth and also forces you to experience suffering in this birth is the ahankar. It is only through the attenuation or weakening of the ahankar, it is only through the suspension of the ahankar, it is only through the surrender of the ahankar, it is only through the transcendence of the ahankar or the annihilation of the ahankar that one can truly attain Jivan Mukti, Videha Mukti, and be situated on the platform of being the soul. So the ahankar is the critical part of your subtle body which deludes you and it prevents you from leaving the subtle body behind, and it also communicates all the suffering of the subtle body and makes you foolishly imagine that you are suffering what the Prakriti is going through. Karya karanam kartritve hetur prakriti uchyate purusha sukha dukhanam bhoktritva hetur uchyate. So Prakriti is doing everything, including enjoyment and suffering. But because you imagine that you are the doer, therefore you have to enjoy and suffer. Purusha prakriti stohi bhumte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangasya sad asad yoni janmasu. And this subtle body also keeps changing in your life because your likes change, your dislikes change, your desires change, your karmas change. And thus you go from one womb to another womb. The womb is decided by the subtle body you carry. And thus you meet all kinds of Prakriti. Prakriti that is pleasant, Prakriti that is unpleasant, Prakriti that gives you a good life, Prakriti that gives you a bad life. And the root of all this is the ahankar. Now this ahankar is the source of all your misery. Therefore, the more self-centered you are, the more selfish you are, the more your activities are concerned with self, the more karmas you accumulate, and the more suffering you experience within this life. But as you lose this self-centeredness, as you become other-centered, as you become God-centered, as you become compassionate, you will become altruistic, and you will become free from suffering. And also you will become free from the cycle of birth and death. So one of the earliest methods that Krishna teaches in how to become free from self is to see that your everyday activity, your duties, your swadharma, your responsibilities, your obligations, all of them must be performed without a sense of self. How do we keep the self out of it? Because you have to perform action in a manner that the self is suspended. And if you suspend the self long enough, over a period of time, that sense of self that has been suspended automatically becomes attenuated, and it becomes easy to deal with. And ultimately, by acting in a manner whereby you have suspended your sense of self, you will eventually become free from that sense of self. And you will become free from your subtle body. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning itself, Krishna begins to tell Arjuna, Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan ma karma phala hetur bhur mate sangostvo akarmani. So Krishna is explaining this most popular verse from the Bhagavad Gita on how one must perform one's duties, responsibilities, activities. And he explains by saying that you have a right to do your duty, but you have no right to the fruit. See, when we perform an activity, the thought is, what will I get out of it? That I is the ahankar. So the ahankar enters into every activity. But when you push away and you say, I don't want anything for self, then automatically what happens is the self is knocked out of the picture. Therefore, the first thing Krishna says is you have no right to the fruit. Ma phaleshu kadachana. Then he goes on to say that when you are performing your activity, do not think that you are the doer. Because when you perform an activity, you think, how skillful I am, how wonderful I am. That's another place where the ahankar enters in. Therefore, Krishna says, do not think that you are the doer. And at the same time, he says, do not be attached to inaction. Because if you do not act and you sit down still, helplessly you are creating karma, and I will come to that. So if you can perform an action without any desire for the fruit, without considering yourself to be the doer, without indeed being attached to inaction, this is the beginning of becoming free from your subtle body. In the 4th chapter, Krishna explains that yasye sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjitah Jnyan agni dagda karmani tamahu panditam buddha. He says, when a person performs every single action, every single activity when he performs, without desire, kama sankalpa, every endeavor that he engages in, yasya sarve samarambha, It's without any desire. Kama sankalpa varjita. Jnana agni dagdha karmani. You can say that in the fire of knowledge, in the fire of divine wisdom, his karmas have been burnt into ashes. And such a person, he says, should be called a wise Pandit, because every single action he performs is without desire, without the sense that I am the doer. So you might think that is only your duty that is asked for. But in fact, Krishna explains it's not just your duty, but everything that you do. Later on, Krishna explains, Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat chuhosi dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushvama darpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities you perform, whatever austerities you perform, everything Krishna says, do it for me. So, in order to stop thinking of the self, or to stop the ahankar, or to bring about a dissolution of the ahankar, what has happened? Krishna has instructed you that you should be completely absorbed in him and offer everything that you're doing to him. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that this is indeed the way that one must act in this world. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities you perform, everything you do for me. And if you do it in that way, what happens? Shubha ashubha falair evam moksha se karma bandhanai sannyasa yoga yuktena vimukto mam evaishyasi. He says, then your good karma and your bad karma, both the karmas are gone. Your karmas are gone. You attain freedom. You attain moksha from your karmas. And at the time of death, instead of taking rebirth here, you come back to me. He also says, Man mana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mam evaishyasi yukta evam atmana matparayana. Krishna says, always think of me, become my devotee, offer homage unto me, be completely absorbed in thoughts of me, and you will come to me without fail. In this verse is the secret mantra. And that secret mantra I'm giving you today is called Remember God, Forget Yourself. If you remember God, you will naturally forget yourself. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prajita Janati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chaya Dahitukam. If you are worshipping God in the prescribed manner, if you're remembering God in order to forget self, then spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly, what will happen? You will find that you will automatically find release from suffering, freedom from karma, freedom from rebirth, and finally you will go back to him. So you cannot even sit for a moment without your mind acting. And although we are speaking on Bhagavad Gita, I don't mind sharing with you that I have also looked at Bhagavad Gita in many ways, from many aspects, and as a doctor, I've looked at it from the perspective of neuroscience. And from the perspective of neuroscience, I've tried to find out why do we have this mind, which is like a monkey, and why is it jumping from here to there? If you sit for a second without having a purpose, your mind will be jumping here and there. And what is the mind doing when it is jumping here and there? And I had occasion to visit Mayo Clinic. And when I visited Mayo Clinic, I met with a neurologist called David Jones. He worked on the quantification of MRI signals in the brain. And he explained to me something very, very unusual. When we discussed this idea of where does the mind go? Why is the mind moving? And he explained that this mind or this brain doesn't work one cell at a time. It works in a whole circuit. And he said that the brain has a default circuit. And what is this default circuit of the brain? It's a default circuit of the brain that goes round and round and round and round, reconstructing, repairing, relating, everything to do with self and the rest of the world. This is called the default mode. Elsewhere, it has been referred to as the default cognition mode. It has also been spoken of as the social cognition mode. If somebody says something insulting to you, when you're doing nothing, your mind will wander. Oh, how dare that person say that to me? What should I do now? How do I respond to that? So you're considering how you can repair your sense of self. If somebody praises you, again you're thinking, how nice, he said this nice thing about me. And in other relationships, you're hunting, finding, trying to associate the sense of self with the rest of the world. And using MRIs, they have found that this default social cognition mode of the brain starts functioning from the time the baby is born, although it does not function when the baby is premature. It has to be a mature baby, and then when it attains maturity, when all 40 weeks are over and then it is born, or if it has grown from prematurity to 40 weeks, then it begins this social cognition mode. It is constantly trying to relate with the rest of the world. Because indeed, we are born helpless. We are born without fangs, without claws, without fur. And if the baby doesn't know how to smile at you, if the baby doesn't know how to do goo-goo to you, you might ignore the baby. It won't survive. So this ability to relate with other people is built into the function of the brain. And the brain constantly works on how to relate self with the world. And this monkey mind, as they call it, is the cause of creating this sense of self. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains various methods, a whole range of methods. A whole range of methods by which you forget self. And they are all called yagyas. He gives yagyas which are offered into the fire. He gives yagyas where you are using your breath. He gives various forms of yagyas in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, yagya means what? You will find many people giving you different meanings for yagyas. But yagya means not for self. When you offer samagri into the havan fire, you say idam agnaya, idam na mama, means not for self, it is for Agni. That idam na mama means you are doing a yagya for annihilating, attenuating, transcending, surrendering the sense of self. The same ahankar which is the cause of your suffering, the same ahankar which is the cause of your rebirth, the same ahankar which is the cause of all trouble in your life, you have to get rid of it with the use of yagya. And you must learn yagya from a teacher. So it is described that tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. So approach someone who has realized his spiritual identity through the performance of yagya and learn from him by asking him questions on how to engage in doing yagya. Therefore, different people will give you different types of yagya, different teachers will give you different yagyas. And if they have truly benefited from the yagyas, they will be able to guide you on how you can bring about a dissolution of the sense of self through the performance of yagya. And I am declaring to you the best yagya is to remember God and to forget self. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that of all forms of yagya, I am the chanting of the holy names. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that of all forms of yagya, yagna nam, japo yagnosmi. Of all forms of yagya, I am the chanting of the holy names. The Brihad Naradiya Puran states, Harer Nam, Harer Nam, Harer Nam eva kevalam, kalau nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranyatha. That in Kali Yuga there is no other way except chanting the holy name. In Kali Yuga there is no other way except chanting the holy name. In Kali Yuga there is no other way except chanting the holy name as a means of deliverance. So let me explain this again from a neuroscience perspective. As I told you, your default social cognition mode of your brain is always working, always working. It is constantly roaming around, just like if you have a painful tooth or your tooth has been extracted, your tongue will keep wandering and going back to the same spot. So also if your sense of self has been injured by insult, if there is something that is lacking in your human relationships, your mind will keep on wandering back to it. You will keep on having thoughts, and sometimes you wish, can I not have a switch which I just turn off that switch and automatically my mind will become silent? But yagya is a way to silence the mind. Of course, there are many forms of yagyas, but I am speaking on chanting of the holy names. So if you are chanting the holy names, what really happens is that the thoughts that you're having become interrupted. I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember the time when we had AM radio and FM was a novelty. So when we had this AM radio, when we were tuning the radio, you would get the announcer maybe giving the details of a cricket match, and that would be disturbed by this sound. Static disturbance would be on the line. And you couldn't hear what he was saying clearly, and you'd keep on shifting the antenna or turning the radio knob so that you could try to get the words out. Similarly, your social cognition mode keeps on rolling round and round and round. Thoughts keep on jumping in your head again and again and again and again. But when you chant, it's like introducing static. It's like introducing static, which disturbs those flow of thoughts of default cognition mode. And the louder you chant, at least loud enough for yourself to hear, but the louder you chant, the more it disturbs the social cognition mode. And therefore your mind becomes gradually silent, and that gives you peace. Every spiritual process has three things. It has an overall philosophy of life. It has some meditation or yajna. And number three, it has some rule of ethics and behavior, which guides your behavior and your ethics and morality. If even one of them is missing, the three-legged stool cannot stand, and spiritual life will meet with collapse. Try it. There are people who have been struggling for 20 years and more, but because they don't indulge in all these three, they are having problems. The Bhagavad Gita recommends as meditation or yajna, it recommends the chanting of the holy names. As your everyday function, all your actions should be performed as an offering to God. Your life should become a continuous, uninterrupted meditation upon God. And what kind of meditation? Not a meditation desiring some fruit, but desiring nothing. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim kavitam va jagdisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishware bhavatat bhakti rahitu ki tvai. Oh Lord, I don't want wealth. I don't want beautiful women. I do not want any number of disciples or followers. I don't even want moksha. You can bring me back into this world again and again and again in order to serve you. Ashlishava padratam pinastumam adarshanam marmatam korotuva. Yatha tatha vidatum lampato mat prananathastu saeva naparaha. That, O Lord, you may treat me roughly in your embrace. You may kick me. You may neglect me. You may make me broken-hearted by never appearing in front of me. But even then you shall be my worshipful Lord unconditionally. So there are two aspects to this process. One is called that it should be unmotivated, and the second is that it should be uninterrupted. Sa vai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radhok saje ahai tuki apratihata yayatma suprasiddhati. There are two qualities of the topmost form of religion. And these two qualities are, one, it should be completely unmotivated, and number two, it should be uninterrupted. I've just explained to you what is unmotivated. I'm not asking for anything, not even peace of mind. Peace of mind is another form of sense gratification of the mind. Indeed, the soul is at peace regardless of whether your mind is at peace or not. If you're situated on the platform of the soul, the mind may be disturbed, but the soul is at peace. And uninterrupted, as I explained to you. Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat johosi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi, kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities you perform, everything you do for me. Shubha ashubha falaireva moksha se karma bandhane. Sannyasa yoga yuktena himukto mami vaishyasi. Everything you do for me, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities, everything you do for me. And if you act in this manner, you will become free from both good karma and bad karma. The fruits of good and bad karma you will be protected from them. And acting in this way with mental renunciation, you will attain moksha. You will become free from your subtle body. And eventually you will come to me. So there is so much more to tell you in Bhagavad Gita, and but I could go on and on. But I think for now, this should give you an idea on how to become free from karma. When you act in this manner, when you become situated on the platform, spiritual platform, you will not be affected by the world the way other people are affected. And you will not be creating fresh karma either. And while there are many, many ways by which to overcome the obstacles you meet in your life, there are different types of yogas which we need to cover some other time. But Krishna explains, Dhyanena atmani pashyanti kechid atmanam atmana anyeche sankhyena yogena karma yogena cha pare anyetva evam ajananta shrutvanebhyo upasate te api atitirante eva mrityam shruti parayana. There are some who use meditation. There are some who use the path of knowledge, Sankhya Yoga. He speaks of as the path of knowledge. And there are others who work in a spirit of devotion and renunciation. And then there are others, he says, who are completely ignorant of all these. And even they, by the process of hearing, as you have been hearing over the last 4 or 5 lectures, you will be able to transcend all suffering, attain moksha, and return back to God. I will pause now because I want to leave some time if there are any questions that you would like to put onto the chat. And also I'd like to tell you that due to circumstances beyond my control, we will be having a break in this series of lectures. And I am currently in another geographical location. When I move back to my normal home, then we may perhaps take up this afresh, or we may take it up where we left off. But all these lectures are recorded and they're available. So those of you who missed 1 or 2, please take the time to hear all of them and reflect on them. You have done Shravana. Now do Manana, think about it. And then meditate on what you should do, which is called Nididhyasana. And this Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday class will be stopping here for the time being. And when I am in a position to conduct these lectures again, we will resume these lectures. So until then, so therefore, if you have any questions, you ask them now. Please ask those questions now. Does anyone have any questions? Hello, please speak up, or at least you can enter it in the chat. You're welcome to speak also, and you're welcome to enter your questions in chat also. Was everything that I said clear? Is there something that was not clear or which you want me to explain further? Well, there was a question that came to me earlier, and the question was about reincarnation. How do you know there is reincarnation? So first I will refer you to a name which you can look up on Zoom, because I don't have enough time to explain everything. But the name of the professor is Dr. Ian Stevenson. Dr. Ian Stevenson was the professor of parapsychology in the University of Virginia. And he has more than 16 volumes of cases which he has studied, which there is no other explanation except that these children would have reincarnated. And he has scientifically established that there's no other cause other than reincarnation for these children. And his books, incidentally, or the volumes of his research are also available on Amazon. In pursuit of learning more about this, I went to meet somebody who had actually studied with him. And I went to Bangalore, and in Bangalore, I met, at that time, she was head of the parapsychology wing of NIMHANS in Bangalore. And there I met her and I asked her about her experiences. And she has herself done many studies on reincarnation, and she gave me a book with some examples of the cases of reincarnation she had studied. And she had worked with Ian Stevenson, and they have firmly established that scientifically there is no other explanation for these cases other than that they have reincarnated. The term is called metempsychosis. So you can look up Satwan Pasricha at NIMHANS, and you can also look up the late Dr. Ian Stevenson. So there's a question here, which is Yagya and Yoga two different concepts? Well, in one sense, they are different, and in one sense, they are the same. Yagya means the activities you do which are not for self, and therefore they're designed to bring about dissolution of the self or attenuation of the self. Yoga is a broader term, and yoga means, it comes from the root word yuj, which means to reunite, which means to reunite the individual soul with God. So yagya means to get rid of this ahankar of prakriti, and yoga means to unite that soul with God. In truth, it's a composite process and they work together. Does that answer your question? Hello, does that answer your question? So there's another question from Vikas who says, should we have fear of God? Well, really, we should have love of God. Fear of God is for those who are wicked, those who are far gone in the process of self-aggrandizing, who are far gone in the process of sinful activity. They should have fear of God. But for most of us, we should have love of God. God is not somebody who sits trying to punish people. He is somebody who's trying to lead you on the right path. So Lavinia asked, is there any particular best time of the day to chant and how much time is it recommended for? Well, the answer is according to how your teacher instructs you. So your teacher will instruct you on how much you should chant and how long it should chant. I recommend that for people who are serious about God, they should chant roughly 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, if they're serious, really serious. I have had occasion, Lavina, I have had occasion to meet Mother Teresa, and she always had her rosary in her hand, always. And her instruction to me was, Doctor, you should chant incessantly. Incessantly. Without ceasing. That means all the time. I hope, Lavina, your question is answered.
Yes, doctor. Thank you.
Now, Raman Ji has a question that to understand the overall philosophy of life. So, the question is, who is God? Who am I? Why do bad things happen to good people? How do I reconnect with God? All these give you an overall philosophy of life. By the time we conclude this series of lectures, at least the overview, if not the entire series on chapter by chapter, verse by verse, you will find that you will be fully grounded in a philosophy of life, which is completely contained within Bhagavad Gita. So, Mr. Ramanji, is it clear? All right, friends, thank you so much for being patient and hearing me. We haven't completed the overview yet. There are still other lectures to cover, like the different types of yogas, leaving the body, you are what you eat, and so many other subjects. But there will be a break now, and then I will perhaps resume when I am back home. So until then, I request you to reflect on what has been said. You have the recordings if you want to hear them again. You please can refer the Bhagavad Gita, and having referred to the Bhagavad Gita, you see the verses that I have quoted. And when am I back? Well, that's not decided. That is still in flux. But as soon as I come to know, you will be informed. Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much, doctor.
God bless all of us, and let us meet again. Thank you.